Hey everyone, tonight I'm going to tell you a real scary story about an old house where strangers appear and no one can see them. This house is full of strange, unsettling secrets. If you missed the previous part, check the link in the top right corner of the video and watch it first. Stay with me as we dive into this terrifying tale. As the night wore on, their conversation became increasingly personal, filled with references to experiences I had never had and accomplishments I had never achieved. According to their version of reality, I was living a far more creative and fulfilling life than the one I actually experienced. They described dinner parties I had supposedly hosted, art projects I had completed, volunteer work I had undertaken in the community. Each story was rich with detail, filled with emotional resonance that suggested genuine memories rather than fabricated tales. "Remember the garden party last spring?" the woman asked with obvious fondness. Everyone said it was the most beautiful event they'd attended, and the way she organized those flower arrangements, truly artistic. I had never hosted a garden party. The backyard had been neglected since I moved in, overrun with weeds and in desperate need of landscaping. But their description was so vivid, so emotionally convincing, that I found myself almost believing it had happened. "And her photography exhibition at the library," the younger man added. "Such a wonderful way to share her talent with the community. The response was overwhelming." Photography was not among my skills or interests. I owned a basic digital camera, but used it only for occasional snapshots during family visits. Yet they spoke of my supposed artistic achievements with the pride of supportive relatives celebrating a loved one's success. As dawn approached, they began to prepare for departure. But their leaving ritual was different this time. Instead of simply walking away, they took time to make small improvements throughout the house. The woman replaced the flickering bulb in my bedroom reading light, installing a new one that provided warmer, more comfortable illumination. The younger man repositioned furniture in subtle ways that improved traffic flow and created more pleasant sight lines. The older man adjusted the thermostat, setting it to maintain a more consistent temperature. These weren't intrusive changes, but thoughtful modifications that enhanced the comfort and functionality of my living space. They worked with the quiet efficiency of people who understood exactly how to make a house feel more like a home. Before leaving, they gathered once more in the living room, speaking in the low tones of people sharing private confidences. "She's adjusting well," the woman said, with satisfaction. "The transition is always difficult, but she's finding her place here." "The house suits her," the older man agreed. "There's something about certain people who belong in certain spaces. This was always meant to be her home." "And ours," the younger man added softly. "All of ours together." They spoke of belonging, of transition, of a shared destiny that connected us in ways I couldn't understand. Their words suggested a larger plan, a purpose that extended beyond simple home maintenance or even elaborate harassment. As they prepared to leave, the woman approached the area where I remained hidden, stopping just a few feet away. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might speak directly to me, might acknowledge my presence and force a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. Instead, she simply said, "Sweet dreams, dear. We'll see you again soon." Then they were gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving me alone with a house that felt simultaneously more comfortable and more alien than ever before. The improvements they had made were undeniable. The new light bulb provided better reading conditions. The furniture arrangements created more pleasant spaces. Even the temperature felt more comfortable thanks to their thermostat adjustment. But each enhancement came with the unsettling reminder that strangers had access to my most private spaces, people who cared for my comfort in ways I found both touching and terrifying. I spent the following day reviewing the security camera footage, hoping to capture clear images of my mysterious visitors, but the recording showed only empty spaces, rooms that appeared unoccupied even during the hours when I had clearly heard voices and observed movement. Either the cameras were malfunctioning in some systematic way, or my visitors existed in a dimension that technology couldn't detect. As I sat in my newly improved reading chair that evening, enjoying the better light they had installed, I forced myself to confront the possibility that had been growing in my mind since their first visit. What if they weren't intruders at all? What if they belonged here just as much as I did, existing in a parallel version of reality, where this house was their home too? The thought was terrifying, but it explained their intimate knowledge of the property, their casual familiarity with my daily routines, their genuine care for my well-being and the house's maintenance. If multiple realities could overlap in the same physical space, if different versions of existence could occasionally bleed through and interact, then my visitors weren't criminals or con artists. They were simply people who lived in the same house I did, just in a different dimension of reality. The implications were staggering. How many other houses might harbor multiple families across different planes of existence? How many people might be sharing spaces without realizing it, living parallel lives in the same rooms, caring for the same properties, creating layered histories that occasionally intersected? But even if I accepted this impossible explanation, questions remained. Why could I perceive them when they apparently couldn't see me? What had changed in the house or in myself that allowed these interactions to occur? And what did they mean when they spoke of my transition and finding my place here? The answers came during their third visit, exactly 1 month after their first appearance. This time, they arrived earlier in the evening, while I was still moving freely through the house. I heard the garage door opening while I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, with no opportunity to hide before they entered. I froze at the stove, spatula in hand, as their familiar voices drifted through the doorway. This was the confrontation I had been dreading, the moment when our parallel existences would collide directly. But when they entered the kitchen, they walked right past me, continuing their conversation without pause, as if I wasn't standing directly in their path. The woman moved to the refrigerator, opening it to examine the contents, while I stood less than 3 feet away. She reached around me to retrieve a container of milk, her arm passing through the space I occupied without any indication that she sensed my presence. "Dinner smells wonderful," she commented to her companions, though the stove had been turned off and no food aromas lingered in the air. I waved my hand frantically in front of her face, shouted at the top of my lungs, even tried to grab her shoulders, but she showed no reaction. It was as if I existed in a space she couldn't perceive, just as they had existed in a space I could barely access. The realization hit me with devastating clarity. I wasn't the solid, primary resident of this house. I was the ghost, the dimensional echo, the parallel existence that occasionally bled through into their reality. Everything I had believed about my life, my ownership of the house, my place in this physical space was a secondary layer of existence. They were the real residents, the people who truly belonged here, and I was the interloper whose presence they felt but couldn't directly perceive. As this understanding settled over me, their conversation began to make perfect sense. They had always been able to sense my presence, to feel the subtle changes I made to their home, to worry about my well-being as they would any family member sharing their space. "She seems unsettled lately," the older man observed, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. "There's been more restless energy in the house." "The transition is difficult," the woman replied, pouring milk into a glass that seemed to float in mid-air from my perspective. "We should do more to make her feel welcome," the younger man suggested. "Small gestures that let her know she belongs here." They were talking about me, discussing my emotional state and planning ways to comfort someone they couldn't see but somehow understood. The groceries they had left, the household improvements, the gentle adjustments to my living space, all had been offerings of comfort, ways of saying that I was welcome in their home, even though I existed in a different layer of reality. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications of my situation. If I was the dimensional echo rather than the primary resident, what did that mean for my legal ownership of the house, for my memories of inheriting it from my grandmother, for my entire understanding of my place in the world? "The paperwork dimension can be confusing," the older man said, as if responding to my thoughts. "Legal documents, property records, family histories, they exist differently across the layers, but belonging transcends documentation." He was speaking to me, somehow sensing my questions, even though he couldn't see or hear me directly. Their ability to perceive my emotional state, to respond to my needs, suggested a connection deeper than simple shared space. "Your grandmother knew," the woman added gently. "She could sense all the layers, all the families who had made this house their home across different dimensions. That's why she left it to you, because you have the same gift." The same gift. The ability to perceive multiple layers of reality, to exist comfortably in parallel dimensions, to serve as a bridge between different versions of the same space. My grandmother had always been sensitive to atmospheres, to the subtle energies that other people missed. She had spoken of the house having good spirits, of feeling welcomed by previous residents, of sensing love and care in every room. I had attributed these comments to sentiment and nostalgia, but what if she had been describing literal experiences, actual encounters with the dimensional families who shared our home across different layers of existence? "The house chose you," the younger man said softly, "just as it chose us. We're all caretakers, all guardians of this space, all responsible for maintaining the love and security that makes it a true home." Over the following hours, they shared their understanding of our shared situation. The house existed as a nexus point, a location where multiple dimensions intersected, and different families could coexist across parallel layers of reality. They had been living here for decades in their dimension, raising children, celebrating holidays, growing old together in rooms that were simultaneously mine and theirs. My arrival had created a new layer, a fresh dimension where I could build my own life while contributing to the overall energy of the space. "Every house has the potential," the woman explained, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had experienced multiple realities. "But it takes special people to activate the connections, to bridge the layers, and maintain harmony between dimensions." "Your presence has strengthened all of us," the older man added. "The house feels more complete, more stable, more truly home than it has in years." As dawn approached, they prepared to return to their primary dimension, but their farewell was different this time. Instead of simply disappearing, they took time to acknowledge my presence directly, speaking to me even though they couldn't see me. "Thank you for sharing this space with us," the woman said, looking directly at where I sat. "Your care for the house, your love for its history, makes it a better home for all of us." "We hope you'll stay," the younger man added. "The house needs someone like you, someone who can appreciate its many layers and help maintain the connections between dimensions. And we need you too," the older man concluded. "Family isn't limited by dimension, and you've become part of ours." They left through the garage, but this time I followed, no longer afraid of being discovered because I finally understood our relationship. At the threshold, the woman turned back one final time. "The cameras will start working properly now," she said, with a gentle smile. "You'll be able to see us clearly, to record our visits, to document the reality you're experiencing. The house wants you to have proof, to feel secure in your understanding." And she was right. From that night forward, the security cameras captured everything: their arrivals, their activities, their care for our shared home. What more importantly, they captured the joy on their faces when they saw evidence of my presence, my own small improvements and additions to our mutual space. We began leaving notes for each other, messages of appreciation, and updates about household needs. They would mention repairs that required attention, and I would complete them, finding satisfaction in maintaining our shared sanctuary. I would indicate preferences for modifications, and they would implement them, always improving the comfort and functionality of our home. The house began to feel alive in a way I had never experienced. Multiple families caring for the same space, multiple generations of love and attention layered into every room. multiple dimensions of belonging intersecting in one magical location. My initial fear transformed into gratitude. I wasn't alone in the house and never had been. I was part of an extended family that transcended the normal boundaries of existence. People who cared for each other across dimensional barriers, sharing responsibility for a home that belonged to all of us. Late at night, when the barriers between dimensions grew thin, I could sometimes hear children laughing in rooms where no children lived in my lair. I could smell cooking from kitchens where no one was preparing meals. I could feel the warmth of gatherings in spaces where I sat alone. But I was never truly alone. The house held all of us, protected all of us, connected all of us in ways that made perfect sense once I stopped trying to apply normal rules to an extraordinary situation. My grandmother had left me more than property. She had left me a magical inheritance, a home that existed in multiple dimensions, a family that spanned parallel realities, a place where love transcended the ordinary limitations of space and time. The familiar strangers weren't strangers at all. They were family, dimensional family. People who shared my deepest connection to a house that was big enough, loving enough, magical enough to hold all of us across every layer of existence. And every night, as I settled in to sleep in our shared sanctuary, I whispered, "Thank you," to the house, to my grandmother, to the dimensional family who had welcomed me into their extraordinary reality. The house whispered back through creaking boards and settling beams, through the morning light streaming through windows they had cleaned, and evening shadows they had arranged, through the constant sense of belonging that made every day feel like coming home to a place where I was loved across multiple layers of existence. Our story had no ending, because love transcends dimension, family transcends reality, and home transcends any single layer of existence. We were the custodians of something magnificent, the guardians of a space where multiple realities intersected in perfect harmony. And in that harmony, I had found not just a house, but a family, not just a home, but a magical connection to something larger than any single dimension could contain. Thanks for staying with us until the end. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and don't miss our upcoming videos. More true scary stories are waiting for you.